Great. And I know you've got a guest you're going to talk to there.
That's right. We'll turn to him right now. We're joined by Andy Smith, who's director of the University of New Hampshire's Survey Center. He's also a professor of political science there. So, Andy, tell us what you're hearing so far about who's voting for whom and why.
Well, it's kind of hard to say. We can wait for another hour, hour and a half, and we'll know. What I expect to see is that Mitt Romney should do pretty well. He's in the early polling and the pre-election polling. He was doing really well among those registered Republicans, as well as those undeclared voters who are really Republicans. Now, those undeclared is what we informally call independents here. But those registered Republicans and undeclared are really Republicans, make up about 80% of the electorate. Romney was getting 40 to 45% of that vote. So he's doing really well there. For the other top candidates, you mentioned Ron Paul. He's doing good among the independents, undeclareds who are really independents, and as well as some Republicans. But he's got a fairly small pool to play in there, and I think he may be capped at about 20 percentage points here in New Hampshire. And then Jon Huntsman, who you mentioned is coming on pretty strong here. He's campaigned a lot. His biggest problem is that the groups that he's doing best among are Democrats who are registered undeclared but voting in the Republican primary. So he's somewhat capped in that he's doing well in the Democratic primary, but he's running in the Republican primary.
Well, Andy, as we look at Newt Gingrich, who's been on the attack a little bit here on the stump this week, and as we look at Rick Santorum, who's been introducing himself a lot to New Hampshire voters this week, perhaps with the hope of getting that broadcast into South Carolina, did they stand a chance here in a less culturally conservative state like New Hampshire?
No, I think you really make a very good point here. New Hampshire is not a culturally conservative state. We have the lowest church attendance in the country, the second lowest level of religiosity. And if you look at 2008 exit polls, only 23% of likely Republican primary voters in 2008 were self-identified evangelicals, compared with 60% in Iowa and about 60% in South Carolina. So anybody pushing a socially conservative message isn't going to do very well here. We've seen in 2008, for example, Mike Huckabee wins Iowa, but comes here and finishes a disappointing third place with only 11% of the vote. I think that Rick Santorum might be for a similar situation, similar surprise.
So, Andy, Judy just asked me how this felt different to me covering this election, this primary, and I'm wondering whether it feels different to you, whether my instinct that it feels a little less intense is correct.
Yeah, it's pretty slow, and I think it started from the very beginning, and it frankly started 4 years ago when Mitt Romney lost, or 3 years ago when Mitt Romney lost and became the prohibitive front runner for the 2012 Republican nomination. Republicans typically pick the person who finishes second. So he's from a neighboring state. He's been known as a moderate northeastern Republican, which fits in with the Republican electorate here, and he's the best known and been the best liked candidate for years here. So since we started polling in February of 2009, Romney's been the clear front runner, been between 35 and 45% in the polls, nobody else really above 10%. So I think what's happened is that the other campaigns have decided to take their limited resources and fight in Iowa and perhaps in South Carolina. That's a critical thing that's different in this campaign as well, is that Romney is the only candidate with significant financial resources. The other guys are running on fumes. As you mentioned, Rick Santorum comes here with essentially a tie in Iowa, but has no money to go on TV here. So the other candidates have had a hard time. Romney doesn't need to campaign that much, so it's felt very, very slow, and we haven't experienced the same kind of campaign that we've seen in previous cycles. I don't think that has much to do with New Hampshire as much as Romney.
Andy, one final brief question, which is turnout. Do we know whether people showed up to vote and whether there was any enthusiasm at the ballot box today?
Well, I haven't heard any real reports. I've heard scattered reports across the state. Some people say turnout's up in their polls. Some say it's down. But I don't think the weather's been good. It's been, frankly, like November here rather than January. So there's no real complaint from the weather. One of the things that we've been seeing in our pre-election polls is that Republicans are more excited in this race than they were for about the 2008 primary, because I think they see this vote as their first chance to vote against President Obama. Whether that'll be shown at the ballot box remains to be seen.
Okay, Andy Smith at the University of New Hampshire. Thanks so much. Back to you, Judy.
Thank you.